Hail and kill, caller. You're on the air.
Hey, what's going on, buddy?
There he is. It's Jack Antonio.
Jack Antonio. Jack Antonio, welcome to the Classic Metal Show.
Hey, how you doing there?
We're doing here. Do you know that you sound very much like Sebastian Bach when you speak?
Yes, I heard every word of your... I can't even describe the beatdown you guys gave to me. It was so thorough in its force. But yes, you mentioned that several times.
Well, you sound a lot like Sebastian. But Jack, may I call you Jack?
You may.
Jack, before we get into this, because I know Chris and I have a lot to ask, why don't you introduce yourself and your show and let people know who you are and where they can find you?
I am the radio persona known as Jack Antonio. I actually have two shows. One I kind of just do a part-time thing in, and that's called The Metal Factory. Don't blame me, I didn't name it. And then my other show, which is my regular show, is called Do You Know Jack? Both shows run on a station called Insane Realm Radio, although Do You Know Jack is actually picked up by a couple of other stations in Canada. You can find me on Facebook, I suppose, if you really give two fucks.
Well, I actually give three, Jack. 3 fucks.
That's impressive.
Three fucks and I'm out.
Well, you know, you guys like baseball down south, so that doesn't surprise me that you have to equate it in those terms.
Right. Well, Jack, Chris and I, at least I'm going to speak for myself. Usually Chris and I can speak in tandem, but in this particular case, we had no animosity toward you personally. We were just very interested in your interviewing style and the questions that you asked Whip when we were basically critiquing your interview on your show.
You know, this is the funny thing about that interview is it's the first time I ever got any kind of recognition from the site known as blabbermouth.net. And I remember telling a buddy of mine, oh my God, like of all of the interviews of, you know, the tons that I've done, that one is the one that has to be the first one out of the fucking gate.
And why were you worried about that one?
Well, I mean, it wasn't like it was the worst interview I ever did, but I mean, I don't know. You guys heard it. It was a bit of an awkward conversation. I felt like I wasn't totally in sync. They told me before the interview even started that Whip was sick of talking about the lawsuit, that they didn't want to cover it. I mean, I don't know. I'm not one for making excuses, so right. I don't know. Fuck it. But I mean, like, at that point too, the only single they had out was Redemption. So I mean, I guess, you know, if I could critique myself,
sure,
I probably should have stuck more to talking about the single than all the other shit that I got into, you know what I'm saying?
Well, why did you feel imperative just to stick with the new record only? I mean, you know, Whip obviously has 30 years of legacy behind him with Queensryche, and, you know, there's a whole lot of topics you could have talked about rather than just concentrate specifically on the new record and, you know, LaTorre being the new singer and all this and that. But what I found interesting is how you kept going back to the classical training and what college and school of music he went to, which, you know, that's like 40 years in the rearview mirror.
I know. I mean, in hindsight, as you said, that was probably, you know, something that I shouldn't have gotten so fixated on, I suppose. I mean, I'm a musician myself, so I don't know. I mean, here's the thing with talking about the old stuff, too, is I wasn't sure where they were at in terms of mentioning any of their previous work with tapes. Right. And I didn't know if the T word would come up or, you know, like at that point, I wasn't as familiar with the actual I mean, I knew about the breakup. I had read about the breakup. I didn't know that all these outlandish things had been done and said maybe as much as I should have, and I didn't know how sensitive they were going to be about, you know, anything remotely involving Tate. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Definitely, man. Well, dude, and I don't want to only focus on that interview because you and I have been talking for, Jesus, probably a month at this point. And, you know, I've listened to some of your other interviews, and you're right. That one was a little bit awkward, but I mean, you actually, and I told you this, and I'll tell, you know, our fans this as well. You actually did an interview with Jeff, the same as we did. And, it was a lot more direct and to the point. So it's definitely not like every interview you do, you go meandering around back to, you know, back when we were in close proximity of each other, like on the Whip interview.
Yeah, I don't know that, you know, like every now and again you have one that you probably wish you know, could have back.
Sure.
And that was, you know, that was one of those times, you know what I'm saying? And I appreciate you, you know, mentioning the Tate interview because, you know, I've read a great deal of the criticism that you guys have taken by, you know,
Sure.
various sources, including the Breakdown Room.
Right.
And you know, I have respect for you actually taking a, you know, an even-handed stance and a fair stance because that was kind of how I approached my interview too. I mean, yours was a lot longer than mine. Yours was twice as long as mine. I just, you know, like I have a much shorter show, so I try and usually keep my interviews between like 15 and 20 minutes.
Sure.
But, you know, there was a lot of similar things, you know, like we didn't focus in on it. I'm just so tired of the whole breakup thing, you know. I just wanted to talk about the music.
Right.
See if that was actually possible.
Sure. Well, dude, one of the things that, again, that you and I have talked about off air that I think is probably interesting, you know, for our fans, you know, that would be interested in checking out your show is kind of the history of it. Because in a lot of ways, you're doing very much like what we've done with the CMS, only, you know, we obviously did it a long time ago and, you know, it's built up to where it is. But, I mean, you're doing it completely by yourself and you're literally making the phone calls and making the emails and, you know, building up your you know, your contact list, you know, from nothing really at this point. So, you know, why don't you talk about that a little bit and how you've been able to build up to where now you're getting some, you know, getting legitimate interviews.
I think I just realized that it's a stepwise process, you know, like you start small and you do a couple of interviews at this level, and then it's kind of like, hey, I've talked to these guys. You think I might be able to talk to this guy? And it's been slow in going, and it's really just been figuring out the business as I go, like understanding how publicists work and even just the language that publicists want to hear in order for them to cough up whoever they happen to represent, you know?
Right. Sure.
If I go back even further, though, I mean, I sort of just fell into this thing by accident, like, I mean, it was all supposed to be a fucking joke, you know, like I started, I was writing like, you know, I don't know, shitty punk songs that I thought were funny, and a couple of buddies of mine heard some of the stuff that I had submitted on an online demo submission site.
Right.
And, they thought it was funny enough that they brought me to their studio and we recorded a couple of tracks in their little studio. I mean, I don't actually live in Chilliwack anymore.
Okay.
I actually live in the Arctic.
Wow.
Well, did you enjoy our Chilliwack song though that we played?
I was like, oh fuck, they're gonna go into that now. Good God. The band Chilliwack is actually not even from Chilliwack, which is the funny thing.
I probably just thought it was a cool word.
It is. It's a little, I don't know, suggestive.
Nice. Awesome,
But
man.
anyway, I took this EP that I made and I started submitting it to radio stations. And one of the radio stations that I submitted to was called Insane Realm Radio. They were just starting up.
Okay.
And I started to do spoken word liners.
Sure.
And one of the DJs there said, hey, you know, you should do your own show. This shit's pretty fucking funny. So not knowing anything about anything in terms of radio, even remotely, I started to do, I guess, what we call in the business like a podcast-style show.
Right.
Okay.
And I just started building up, and I never, this is the funny part too, is I never intended on doing interviews. I just intended on just being a straight-up guy that played music and tried to say weird shit in between songs. And I sort of fell into doing interviews, and, you know, one thing led to another until I'm talking to guys like Michael Wilton and Jeff Tate, and, you know, I've actually talked to Sebastian Bach as well, so that would probably be pretty entertaining for you guys to hear a guy that sounds like Sebastian talking to Sebastian Bach. I'm sure you'd have a hell of a lot of fun with that.
Right. Well, how did you find out that we kind of goofed on your interview? Where did you find that?
I've got a wide variety of contacts on Facebook, and every now and again stuff comes across my screen about the show, or, you know, like how that whole, I'm not even entirely sure how that process works, but something floated across my screen. And it said, classic metal show whips on Insane Realm Radio. And I'm like, oh, shit.
What was...
So I go
ahead.
to this link, and it's a Spreaker link, and I hit play on it, and I'm like, these assholes are talking about my whip interview, the one interview that, you know, I wish I could have done again. And here they're just like, you know... You're drawing it out. You're exposing my weaknesses for all to see and hear.
So at first, were you mad about it, or were you disgusted, or were you pissed off, or were you sort of stunned that somebody took that time out of the day to critique you as harsh as we did? And we do harsh stuff, but it's not meant to, you know, it's just what we think. It's all just off the cuff reaction. So what was your reaction?
Well, I you know, part of my style is I like to sometimes ask or make like really oddball questions, almost to throw the artist off. So when you guys started, I mentioned a restaurant in Bellingham that I used to go to when I was 10, 12 years old, to Michael Wilton, you know, guitar god, just to see what he would say. So you picked up on that right away, and I was actually howling at first because I thought that was, you're like, come on, guy, you're talking about a restaurant in Bellingham to this great guitar player. So I did, and then you started to get into the meat and bones about it, and I was like, fuck.
Well, we are thorough.
Yes, you're very thorough, I must admit.
Now, had you ever heard of the Classic Metal Show before, or is it that was your first experience being exposed to us?
That was my indoctrination into the Classic Metal Show right there, brother.
Nice. Well, we've had other people over the years who discovered us the same way you did. And, you know, when we've had a chance, to, at least the cool people, which now you're in the cool category because you know.
Oh, thank fucking God.
They go, I heard that for the first time. I was horrified. Was that the reaction?
I must admit, I went through the 5 stages of grief, you know, and eventually I came to an acceptance. And plus I sent you that little message saying, ha ha. And
right.
You responded very respectfully, and then I was like, okay, this is all good. I can run with this, you know?
Sure. Dude, that's too funny. But that's always been our thing, too, and, you know, as I told you, you know, we don't take ourselves very serious, and nothing makes us happier than when people come back at us, you know, and, but it's like, you know, I listened back to it before I responded to you because I'll be honest, I don't remember shit from show to show. But, you know, I listened back to it. I was like, all right, we weren't that bad. We were, you know, a little bit vicious, but not too bad. And you were like, okay, that's fine. And you were honest. You were like, yeah, that pissed me off at first. But then you took it as, well, okay, I'll work on this or that. And, you know, it's a good attitude, man. It's what's going to make you fucking stay around instead of, you know, going away in 2 months because you're actually trying to be better at it and trying to have something to say, which is something that, as I'm sure you're well aware, is very rare on the internet in internet broadcasting. Everybody thinks that they're a DJ, but then they don't realize the work that has to go into it to make yourself better.
Oh shit, yeah. I mean, sometimes I just feel like, I'm playing DJ. Like I don't know fuck all about this thing. I mean, I guess this is not a very good advertisement for my own show, but I mean, I'm always trying to figure out ways to learn and improve, and all of the kind of negative / nasty for the sake of humor comments aside, one thing that you really revealed was that at times I have, even after an edit, I have a tendency maybe to throw some obvious questions in there, or to like be redundant, like repeat something that an artist had already said. And I listened to a couple of my interviews. I was like, fuck, I do that. And then that made me really want to think, okay, I gotta stop doing that, obviously.
Right. Well, one question that should never be uttered.
What's it like?
What's it like? Never ask, what's it like?
No matter what they've done, find a way to address it without what's it like. Because the answer is always, it's great. Nobody ever answers what's it like with, man, that fucking sucks. No one does. They all just lie on that question.
I remember one thing that you guys mentioned too was I was talking to Whip about the single, and I go, hey, do you want you want to talk about that? And you guys started to make fun of that. Actually, that's a question that I thought was hilarious that somebody actually asked me in an interview once, and I thought I thought at the time to myself, that's a really stupid fucking question. So sometimes just as a joke, I'll go, yeah, you guys have got this single, Redemption, that just came out. You want to talk about that? Like, obviously he does. That's why he's fucking on it.
Right.
So, I mean, there was some things that you made fun of that made me laugh, because it's like, yeah, like I just do that sort of thing to be funny.
Sure.
Like if I was going to be legit, I wouldn't be talking to a guy about a restaurant in Bellingham that I went to when I was, 10 years old. I mean, the restaurant's probably long gone. I haven't lived in Chilliwack in like 20 years.
Right.
Anyway, I'll stop talking about the restaurant in Bellingham, because that's something that annoyed you guys in the first place.
Well, what you should have said is, Whip, you've worked with Jeff Tate for 30 years. What comes to mind?
Well, I would have, had I been allowed to do that.
Allowed? Who stopped you?
I know, Dad.
The publicist said
really?
He doesn't want to talk about Tate.
Yeah, I was told the same thing and ignored it.
Well, I mean, like, you get to a point where, maybe you can do that, but, like, Whip was one of my first bigger interviews. Like, I'd done a few bigger ones before, but, I mean, when you're trying to go on that upward trajectory...
Well, sure. Dude, believe me, I'm not bagging on you for that. I'm saying I got the exact same speech. I got the exact same. We're not going to talk about Tate. We're not going to talk about the lawsuit. We're going to talk only about the new record. Like, yeah, okay, whatever. Get him on the phone. and admittedly, I mean, Neeley will tell you, and I'll tell you too. I mean, the Classic Metal Show's been on for 18 years, and I did 12 more years in commercial radio. So I've done enough interviews to where they're not really going to beat me up, where they might where you're still a new name on their list.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think half the time they're like, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah, well, it probably will be that way for a while. Believe me, you're going to do a lot of Laura Wilde interviews before you get to Ted Nugent.
Actually, I think I might have put in a request to whoever her people are.
Yeah, that would be Chips.
I don't know. I mean, you just throw shit at the wall, and sometimes it sticks, and you actually get a response.
Well, there you go. What's the worst that could happen? They just say no, right?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've always approached this thing thinking, like, if I weren't going to do this anymore tomorrow, I'd be satisfied, because I've got to talk. I've been able to talk to a lot of cool people.
Sure. Definitely.
And I mean, that's an amazing thing in itself.
Well, good, Jack. I'm glad you're sticking with it. I'm glad you have a good sense of humor, and I'm glad you didn't take what we did, too personal, because it certainly wasn't meant to be directed at you on a personal level. So, you're a good sport, and we appreciate you coming on the show and talking about it. And now, do you listen to the CMS podcast now, or have you just listened to that one?
I've tuned into a couple. Like, I listened to the whole Tate interview because it aired after mine did, so I wanted to see what your approach was like. You know, like, I don't know. It's like a learning experience, and I knew that you were going to take a little bit more, brash an approach. Like, I played mine really safe. You know, like I think you mentioned you had heard mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I got lots of good stuff out of Jeff, and I told Jeff's publicist that I didn't want to talk about any of that shit anyway. But yeah, I checked out a few, and I checked out after when you were talking about all the you guys were talking about all the criticism, and I've checked out things here and there. Like there was this one interview where it was some dude, in the southern states somewhere talking to Jeff Tate, and you guys did the same thing.
Yeah, it was
that was fucking funny.
Mental Metal Radio with the Metal God, DJ Metal God.
Oh, man. Oh, well, yeah. So there was that.
Now that guy took a whipping.
Yes, he did. It made me feel a lot better about myself when I heard that one.
Nice. All right, Jack, again, like I said, we appreciate you coming on the show and being a part of the show tonight. So once again, why don't you throw those plugs out there where the fans can find out about you?
Yeah, sure. You can check me out on Facebook at The Metal Factory. I think it's pretty much the only Metal Factory radio show. Like I said, it was a show that I kind of took over. And then my main show is called Do You Know Jack Radio Show. That one I focus a little bit more on indie rock and Canadian music and do the odd heavy metal interview, but I don't know, it's fun. It's all fun, man. And I appreciate you guys having me on. Much respect to you gents, and big shout out from northern Canada, which is where I'm actually calling you from. I live in the fucking Arctic.
Well, we know somebody up there.
Yes,
Thor.
Oh yeah,
Thor.
Oh, that's right. Well, I've interviewed him too. Very entertaining guy.
Yep. How close are you to Newfoundland?
Oh, nowhere. I'm in the Northwest Territories.
I don't know where's Newfoundland. Is that
he's
all
up there? He's up there near Alaska.
Yes.
So, do the ice road truckers pass by your house?
Actually, yes. Yeah, that's the town. The very first season where they're in a little town called Yellowknife, and there's that crazy truck driver named Alex. Alex's daughter was our babysitter for a while.
Wow, look at you.
Nice.
Yeah, I know that. That's my brush with, celebrity, quote unquote.
And now you got the classic metal show to add to your collection.
Yeah, see, I'm getting more and more famous as we speak here now that I have all this classic metal show cred.
Well, a lot of people will hear this, Jack.
Well, I appreciate that. I just do what I do.
Sure.
Fuck it if people can't take a joke.
I agree.
Right.
All right, Jack. Well, we're going to wrap things up here. Is there something you'd like us to play in your honor?
Oh, why don't you play? Do you have anything from White Wizard?
Actually, I may. I believe I do. Let me look real quick here. I'll tell you. White Wizard. Yes, I have. Come on, White Wizard. Come on up. I have The Devil's Cut, White Wizard Over the Top, and White Wizard Demos.
Oh, The Devil's Cut's the new one, so whatever track suits your fancy.
All right. Well, let me see here.
Just go track 3. I don't know what it is, but that's always a good track.
Okay, Kings of
track 3. When in doubt, track 3. All right.
Kings of the Highway.
Yeah,
sounds like a good one.
All right. Well,
that's a good. You got to do a lot of driving to get up to northern Canada.
And we'll dedicate that to the ice road truckers that go by your house.
That's right. That's right. Well, all right, boys. Thanks again, and much respect. Appreciate you having me on.
All right, Jack. Thanks for doing this.
All right, Jack. Stick with it.
All right.
All right. Well, here it is for our new friend Jack Antonio. This is White Wizard with Kings of the Highway, exclusively here
on your classic metal show.